member of United International SMEs Organization, UNISMO. I'll be your moderator for this morning. I am delighted to welcome you all to the 9th International UN MSMEs Day Summit 2021, held online from our beloved country, the Kingdom of Bahrain. As all of you may have noticed, the theme of the summit this year is MSMEs and the digital transformation post the pandemic. Is indeed very relevant and timely, considering the way our world interacts today. Please welcome with me Dr. Abdel Hassan Al-Dairi, the chairman of Bahrain SME Society and the general coordinator of the United International SMEs Organization, UNISMO, to deliver his welcome speech. Dr. Abdel Hassan.
Thank you very much. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الأخوة والأخوات، السيدات والسادة المشاركين في مؤتمرنا السنوي التاسع لقمة اليوم العالمي للمؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة 2021 بعنوان أهمية التحول الرقمي للمؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة في ظل جائحة كورونا. Your Excellencies, our distinguished speakers, honorable guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good evening worldwide, and welcome to our 9th International UN MSMEs Day Conference 2021. I'll be speaking for a minute in Arabic and then switch to English. السلام عليكم جميعا وأسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير، ويسعدني ويشرفني أن أرحب بكم اليوم في افتتاح المؤتمر السنوي التاسع لقمة اليوم العالمي للمؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة 2021، والذي يتم تنظيمه هذا العام بالتعاون مع الاتحاد العالمي للمؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة اليونيزمو، مستذكرا بكل الفخر والاعتزاز الجهود الحثيثة التي بذلها سعادة الأخ عبد النبي بن عبد الله الشعلة رئيس اليونيزمو ورئيس اللجنة العليا المنظمة للمؤتمر طيلة الشهور الماضية. ولا يفوتني أن أتقدم بجزيل الشكر والتقدير لوزير الصناعة والتجارة والسياحة سعادة الأخ زايد بن راشد الزياني لدعمه المتواصل لمؤتمرنا هذا ومشاركته معنا اليوم كمتحدث رئيسي في جلسة الحوار الوزارية بعنوان دور الحكومات في دعم التحول الرقمي للمؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة، والتي تضم أيضا وزراء المؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة في كل من جمهورية الهند الصديقة ودولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة، فلهم كذلك كل الشكر والتقدير. وكذلك الشكر موصول لسعادة وزير الخارجية الدكتور عبد اللطيف بن راشد الزياني لإنابته وكيل الوزارة للشؤون القنصلية والإدارية سعادة السفير توفيق المنصور للمشاركة معنا نيابة عنه بإلقاء الكلمة الافتتاحية في اليوم الثاني من المؤتمر. كما ولا يفوتني أن أتقدم بالشكر إلى القائم بأعمال المنسق المقيم لمكتب الأمم المتحدة في البحرين سعادة السفير محمد الزركاني، وكذلك الممثل المقيم لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة الإنمائي في البحرين سعادة السفير ستيفانو بيتيناتو، وجميع المتحدثين والمشاركين في مؤتمرنا هذا العام. وأخص بالشكر الرعاة والجهات الداعمة للمؤتمر، وكذلك الإخوة والأخوات أعضاء اللجنة العليا واللجنة المنظمة للمؤتمر الذين أعطوا من وقتهم الكثير وبذلوا الجهود الحثيثة لإخراج المؤتمر على أكمل وجه. والآن اسمحوا لي التحدث باللغة الإنجليزية لوجود الكثير من المشاركين حول أنحاء العالم من غير الناطقين باللغة العربية. Your Excellencies, our distinguished speakers, honorable guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good evening to all of you worldwide, and welcome to our 9th International UN MSMEs Day Conference 2021. Bahrain SME Society is proud to organize its 9th International UN MSMEs Day Summit this year in cooperation with the United International SMEs Organization, UNISMO, and with participation of valuable experts from Bahrain and abroad. Due to the pandemic, we continue organizing our annual conference online for the second consecutive year and pray that the pandemic ends soon worldwide. We decided to devote our conference this year to discuss various support programs and tools to help the MSMEs in the digital transformation process during and post the pandemic. Our distinguished speakers from the government and the private sector will be discussing and debating the best practices worldwide that enable the MSMEs to benefit from the digitalization of their operations in order to cope with the pandemic and also to foster their productivity. My country, Bahrain, decided to continue its various financial support schemes that started last year in order to cope with the pandemic and ensure the business continuity of all sectors. We commend such efforts and appreciate more continuous support to cope with the pandemic and sustain the business post the pandemic, as it is expected to face an economic crisis once the pandemic is over. So we call upon the governments, UN agencies, and representatives of the private sector worldwide to prepare for a collective contingency plan to face the expected economic crisis and prevent the closure of many business entities, especially the micro and small enterprises, MSEs, as they are the first to face the hit. Ladies and gentlemen, we are thankful to the UN for declaring the 27th of June as an International UN Day for the MSMEs, as they are deemed to be the backbone of the national economy of any country. According to the International Labour Organization, ILO's recent report on the SMEs' resilience during this worldwide crisis, it says, the COVID-19 pandemic will have a strong effect on labor markets worldwide, especially in the developing economies, where more than 70% of the workforce is in self-employment or works in micro and small enterprises. Most MSMEs in developing countries, the smallest often are run by women, operate in saturated sectors in the informal economy, and most lack social protection. MSMEs will therefore be the first to suffer devastating consequences of the economic downturn. Restarting the economy and creating jobs will be key once the immediate health crisis is over. About post-crisis recovery, it says, what we know about how economies react to health crisis, what this means for MSMEs, and what comes after. The COVID-19 health crisis and the associated measures of confinement will have devastating consequences for micro and small businesses, operations, and will disrupt many existing value chains. This in turn will lead to loss of income and sharp increase in unemployment. I end the quote. Ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 imposed new conditions which led to new systems and innovative solutions to accelerate and advance various manufacturing means. And it is very important to join efforts between the public and the private sectors for collective measures and means to support the national economy of any country especially the MSME sector during the pandemic, using innovative measures and contemporary methods. And at this International MSME Summit today, we urge for a public-private partnership initiatives in the field of technology, innovation, and digital transformation for creating a synergy of every effort to help sustain the MSMEs and the wider economy worldwide. Finally, I would like to say that the MSMEs are important for the economy, and their importance is increasing during such pandemic. So the future is for the MSMEs. However, all efforts are needed to strengthen such sector in order to help play its role in the diversification and prosperity of the economy. Thank you. وختاما لا يسعني إلا أن أتقدم بجزيل الشكر والعرفان لكل من ساهم في إنجاح هذا الملتقى بالإعداد والتنظيم والحضور والمشاركة، مكررا شكري وتقديري لكم جميعا ولحسن استماعكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Hassan, for very informative welcome speech. Please welcome with me His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Al-Zarqani, the UN Resident Coordinator and Chief of IOM UN Office Bahrain, for the opening speech. Mr. Al-Zarqani, the floor is yours. Mr. Al-Zarqani, he is trying to reach us from his office. Due to technicalities, we are losing touches with him at the moment.
He's there, his photo is there.
Yeah. He's sitting there.
We may start إذا 5 دقائق we start the session. نخلي كلمة عقب. فاطمة تقولي له هل بطول؟ إذا دقيقتين أوكي. قولي حق دكتور رائد. محمد شو أقول حق دكتور رائد؟ قول له إذا دقيقتين أوكي ننتظر، إذا أكثر بنبدل ministers, they are all there. Five minutes. Shall we start the ministerial session? إذا 5 دقائق وايد ينتظرون كلهم. So we switch off due to, and then we'll have the after.
As yes, as I received that we now going to change a little bit and make adjustment in the program, and we are going to pull the ministerial session forward due to some technicalities with Al-Zarqani from his good office. Yes. MSMEs, Ministerial Dialogue, Government Role and MSMEs Digitalization. Ministers from Bahrain, India, and United Arab Emirates, chaired by Simon Harrison, UNISMO board member, President of Australia Bahrain Business Council, ABBC. The Australia Bahrain Business Council is the only bilateral council devoted to the bilateral relationship. It is now the third largest council in Australia, and it has recently signed MOUs with various countries in the Middle East. Mr. Harrison, the floor is yours. Please welcome the excellencies. Thank you. very much.
Thank you, and welcome to your excellencies and friends from around the globe. I'm calling today from a very cold and a very wet Australia, but those such as Dr. Al-Falassi, who know Australia very well, I believe, will know that Australia continues to have a very positive outlook for the post-COVID world, recognizing the challenges that we're going to have, but nevertheless, very positive as we step forward. As a board member, I'd like to recognize the tirelessness of His Excellency.
Mr. Harrison, he's speaking from
Sound okay? Okay, ترى الصوت.
Australia.
Yes, could you hear me? Can you hear me?
Sound okay ترى.
Yes, okay, you can hear me, okay. I was saying I'd like to recognize the tirelessness of His Excellency Abdelnaby Al-Shola, President of UNISMA and Chairman of the Steering Committee of the conference, and also our good friend Abdul Hassan Al-Dari. SMEs certainly couldn't hope for a more committed and foresightful leadership. Abdul Hassan, could I ask you perhaps to just mute your microphone if you could? Thank you. Thank you. The COVID-19 outbreak has accelerated the transformation of SMEs across the globe. The crisis has also stressed the need to accelerate SME digitalization to weather the storm in the short term, as well as for increasing resilience in the longer term, and to borrow a phrase, to build back better. Confinement, as we know, has kept workers at home as school doors have closed, and as many businesses who required physical contact have gone broke, often in the sectors where SMEs are the majority, such as retail, trade, recreation, hotels, and food services. And they all, I believe, have highlighted the limits of non-digital business models. The gaps in opportunities between businesses that have a digital profile were accentuated. The COVID outbreak and the rapid evolution in markets and business conditions do, however, provide opportunities and incentives for SMEs to go digital. Indeed, more than just opportunity, this is actually about survival. We're seeing a rapid shift to new tools across entire supply chains, new data-driven decision-making models, changes in customer behavior, cybersecurity, and data integrity. All of these have lasting effects on SMEs across all sectors, all issues, and all geographies. I think we can agree that COVID hit us quickly, and SMEs and others were all ill-prepared for this seismic transformation, as is the nature of these global shocks. Pre-COVID, digital transformation was happening at a significant pace, but we were not under attack. COVID changed all that, and SMEs found themselves on a wartime footing. To survive, they needed and need to innovate at a significant level, to upgrade digital capacity, acquire new skills, and reach out to new markets and create new supply chains. Governments then had to rapidly assess management crisis approaches, structural reforms, policy challenges, and then design recovery packages. A large mix of approaches has emerged to unleash SME and entrepreneurs' potential. The OECD 2020 Programme of Work of the D4 SME Initiative has focused on SME digitalization in response to the COVID crisis, such as by advancing groundwork for empirical research and promoting knowledge exchange. In the meantime, it's been a fight for survival. We're very privileged today to have a leading panel of speakers who are, in effect, the generals at the forefront of the current economic war on COVID for their nations. Our speakers are, in this order, Mr. Zayed bin Rashid Al Zani, who was appointed Minister of Industry, Commerce and Tourism some 12 years ago. His Excellency, Mr. Pratap Chandra Sarangi, Minister of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises for the Republic of India, and His Excellency, Dr. Ahmed Balhul Al-Fasali, Minister of State for Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Each of our speakers will speak in turn as to areas of particular interest for their nations and globally, and then I'll put one or two questions. We'll keep it pretty informal, as there's also a session at the very end of this for questions from the digital floor. So first of all, His Excellency Zayed bin Rashid Al Zani. He was appointed Minister of Industry, Commerce and Tourism in December 2014, and prior to his appointment, he led his family business as the chairman of Zani Investments, Euro Motors, Zani Motors, and a raft of other industries. In addition, he also served as MD for the First Motors and chairman of the Bahrain International Circuit. He graduated from Boston University, where he received an MBA in finance and was a former board member of Boston University International Advisory Board. His Excellency is also Chairman of Gulf Air Board from April 2017. His Excellency sits on the boards of the Economic Development Board, EDB, Gulf Aviation Academy, Bahrain Airport Company, and the Business Family Network. As well as acting as the Minister in charge of Bahrain Burs from 2016, he's also a member of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS. Your Excellency, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, Minister Al-Falasi, Minister Sarangi. It's a pleasure to be joining you this morning in the opening session of this conference. I have prepared a very brief speech, if you allow me, because in the interest of time, I'd like to devote more time to the Q&A session. If you all agree, I think there's much more to learn by hearing from people within the sector than by giving them a speech that was prepared in the ministry. Nevertheless, I would like to start by extending my thanks and gratitudes to the team behind the initiative, headed by the chairman of the Bahrain SME Society, Dr. Abdul Hussein Al-Diri. I would like to take this opportunity to also thank Mr. Abdul Rahim Fakhro, the vice chairman and the chairman of the forum, and assure them of the ministry's continued support to the SME sector in Bahrain, as that is a very, very important and vital sector within the vision of the government 2030. As a ministry, we recognize the role of SMEs in our economy, and we work continuously to support and grow the sector in our economy. Our efforts as a government in creating the supportive business environment, whether being as general as an FTA with the United States, or as specific as funding through Tamkeen initiatives, or even as advanced as launching an export facilitation bureau in collaboration with the Bahrain Development Board, will never be an alternative to your drive and ambition. The majority of the work and responsibility lies within you and your dreams. And we encourage you to start small, but always think big. Let the world be your oyster, and do not confine your ambitions to the small markets of Bahrain or the Gulf, for that matter. Today, COVID-19 crisis has taught us that the pandemic and the containment measures do not impact everyone in the same way. Among the private sectors, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, especially those led by women, youth, ethnic minorities, and migrants, suffered the most. An International Trade Center survey on COVID-19 impact amongst businesses in 136 countries has shown that nearly 62% of women-led small businesses have been strongly affected by the crisis, compared to just over half of firms led by men. And women-owned are 27% more likely not to survive the pandemic. In the Kingdom of Bahrain, we have addressed the challenges that this sector faced during COVID-19 crisis through more than 4.3 billion initial stimulus package starting in March 2020. This was the equivalent of 32% of our GDP, and it was meant to be a strong shot in the arm at the very beginning to reduce the impact of job loss and to maintain employment throughout the economy. This was followed by two stimulus packages towards the third and fourth quarter of 2020 on a diluted basis, focusing more on the affected sectors and narrowing down support to those that were mostly affected because of the pandemic. This has continued again in 2021 by extending a further quarterly support to those most affected due to the new variants of COVID-19 that we are witnessing nowadays. And though such initiatives were able to maintain steady growth rates, and if we were to talk about the contribution of SME into the national GDP or their contribution to non-oil export, as well as their role in the creation, in job creation. These measures are being looked after by the SME Development Board, which I chair, and with our colleagues from the Ministry of Youth and Sport, the EDB, Economic Development Board, and Tamkeen, and the Bahrain Development Bank. Today, we celebrate the International MSME Day, and Bahrain would like to reiterate on some of the new norms that should be adopted by the sector to ensure sustainability and growth. And the key word here is digital transformation, which is the main focus of today's event. With that, I thank you all for taking the time to be here with us this morning or this evening, depending which part of the world you are in. And I wish you a fruitful conference. Finally, I thank you for giving us the opportunity to be part of your success and assure you of our continued support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm told by our organisers that we'll take questions at the end of all three presentations, but thank you for yours at the moment. Secondly, if I can move on to His Excellency, Mr. Pratap Chandra Sarangi. Mr. Sarangi was appointed Minister of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises for the Republic of India in June 2019. And in less than 6 months of his appointment, the first COVID case was officially recognised in Wuhan. The first Indian lockdowns began on Kerala on the 23rd of March the following year. And 2 years after his appointment, and 2 weeks ago, India had the highest rates after the US of COVID illness. It's been a true baptism of fire for you, Your Excellency, and we'd like to hear from you now as to how India is coping in terms of its SME sector and more generally. Thank you.
Namaskar. Mr. Simon Harrison, the chair of the current session. H.E. Jayed Rashid Al Jiani, Minister of Industry, Commerce and Tourism, Government of Bahrain. His Excellency Abdul Nabi Abdullah Al Sola, Chairman, United International SMEs Organization. Dear fellow ministers and dignitaries participating from other countries. I am very pleased to participate in the ministerial session of the 9th International UN MSMEs Day Summit 2021 on the theme MSME and digital transformation post the pandemic. First of all, I would like to congratulate United International SMEs Organization and Bahrain SMEs Society for choosing a very relevant and interesting theme in the present context and successfully organizing this event. India and Bahrain have deep-rooted civilizational and close ties, which have been further strengthened by regular high-level visits. Our bilateral cooperation has diversified and covers entire gamut of sectors, including political, economic, educational, cultural, and people-to-people contact. Our excellent bilateral relations are reflected in the trade and investment also. Despite the challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic, bilateral trade has been robust and maintained a level of approximate $1 billion, and India continues to be among top 10 trading partners of Bahrain. Investment from both directions have witnessed significant increase in the recent times. India is the 5th largest investor in Bahrain. There is still a lot of untapped potential. India is keen to strengthen trade and investment ties with Bahrain, and cooperation between SMEs in both countries can be crucial in this regard. The small and medium businesses, both in India and Bahrain, accounts for nearly 30% of GDP, employing a large population. The sector also makes up for 33.4% of India's output in manufacturing. Cooperation between SMEs in the field of renewable energy, fintech, education, health and pharmaceuticals, agro and food processing infrastructure needs to be explored and pushed further. Given strength of India in the field of IT, Indian IT companies can also come forward to digital transformation of Bahrain SMEs by providing digital and technological vast solutions. India is one of the largest startup ecosystem with a number of unicorns. These are providing innovative technology-based solutions. These companies can also collaborate with Bahrain companies to cater to the whole Gulf Cooperation Council and Middle East and North Africa region market, as Bahrain is gateway to the whole GCC region. Small and medium-sized enterprises play a key role in the economics of the countries in the world, particularly in the developing countries, by their contribution to the national economic growth and employment. They represent about 90% of businesses and more than 50% of employment worldwide. Formal SMEs contribute up to 40% of national income, GDP in emerging economies. COVID-19 pandemic has hit this segment of the economy very hard. SMEs are facing problems not only in terms of market access, improving the overall productivity and having access to more finance, but their sustainability has also become a major issue. The present pandemic has resulted in loss of millions of jobs. Hence, recovery of SMEs is one of the most important aspects for overall economic recovery post-pandemic. Many ways are being discussed in this regard, and one of the main ideas being mooted is digital transformation of economics. The government of India recognized the hardship being faced by the MSMEs due to COVID-19. Therefore, specific relief measures were announced for the MSME sector. The government of India came out with rupees $2,000 billion mega economic relief package for MSMEs, announced a new definition of MSMEs to pave the way for their growth, earmarked at rupees 200 billion strong subordinate debt fund for stressed MSMEs, set up a fund of funds to mobilize equity for MSMEs and get them listed on the stock exchanges. The government also restricted the global tender for work value of rupees 2,000 million to $1 million to benefit MSMEs. Besides, the government of India introduced a seamless digital platform for the registration of MSMEs and their linkage with government schemes, public procurement system, and delayed payment portals. The government has encouraged the MSMEs to embrace new technologies and adopt digital tools and techniques in the unprecedented times to reveal and craft new models that will ensure speedy revival of their businesses and become future ready. The government has also endeavored to create an ecosystem and policy framework that promote import substitution and export promotion to make MSMEs competitive. We have a good network of technology centers across the country, which are helping our MSMEs to use and leverage new technologies. I once again thank UNISMO and Bahrain SME Society for organizing this wonderful event. I wish them all success. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That's much appreciated. Our third speaker is His Excellency Dr. Hamid Al-Hul Al-Falasi, Minister of State for Entrepreneurship and SMEs in the United Arab Emirates. Under this role, His Excellency is at the forefront of designing national initiatives to strengthen the UAE's SME sector, one of the engines of the national economy, and to promote entrepreneurship in various industries. He's also tasked to set a strategic direction and develop a national policy for the country's tourism sector as we pull through and hopefully out of the pandemic before too long. Before his present position, he was Minister of State for Higher Education, where he formulated new policies for that sector, as well as streamlined the work of higher education institutions. In October 2017, pursuant to ministerial amendment to the UAE government, he took responsibility of equipping UAE nationals with skills for the future. His Excellency is also former chairman, of the Federal Authority for Human Resources and chairman of the Board of Directors of the UAE Space Agency. He's previously held positions of CEO of Masdar, Director of Dubai Tourism, and Vice President of Mubadala Industry Unit. His Excellency is a great friend of my home here in Australia. He holds a PhD from Monash University and a master's degree from the University of Melbourne, and a bachelor's degree in communication engineering from Khalifa University in the UAE. His Excellency accepted his ministerial role in July 2020, 6 months after the first recorded COVID case in the UAE. COVID peaked in the UAE in February 2021 and inshallah appears to be plateauing out as at today. Your Excellency.
Yes, thank you, Simon, for hosting me. And I think reflecting on the temperature here above 40 degrees, I'm quite jealous of not being in Australia right now where it's really cold and winter. We used to complain as students, but now we may be missing it a lot. Again, I'm very thankful for the invitation. Happy and proud to represent the UAE on this esteemed ministerial panel. My thanks go to His Excellency Zaid Al-Zayani, for this invitation. He's a close colleague, and we work on multiple fronts, I mean, from SMEs to tourism, and I think there's a lot of potential to move forward. India as well is a very big bilateral partner for us, a strategic partner to be precise. And I think the point all the guests have alluded to around micro SMEs, their importance, the situation with COVID-19, I think, if anything, has put greater emphasis on the role that we have today. In the UAE, we're no different. Micro and SMEs represent up to 98% of all registered enterprises. They also contribute a significant contribution, 52% to non-oil GDP, and they also account for 57% of private sector employment. So really, they are the core engine of the economy in the UAE. Beyond simply looking at the existing contribution to the economy, we often overlook the potential that startups have in transforming entire business ecosystems. If you look at companies globally, I mean, we all know them, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Netflix, the Ubers, they have really transformed what we do. So besides having that economical, contribution aspect, they also have the potential to be a huge transformation for the, livelihood of everyone around the globe. And if anything, we've seen how COVID-19 put greater emphasis on the second point, which is the importance of incubating startups to come up with innovative solutions that are beneficial to all. The world today needs this transformational energy more than ever. Coming out of COVID-19, we see a path to recovery. As everyone can read the news today, we see an increase in commodities, we see an increase in confidence when it comes to oil prices, in terms of tourism as well. So I think now is the time to double down on the support for SMEs. Governments worldwide, and the UAE is no different, have all provided stimulus packages the past year to SMEs. We have provided within the UAE 390 billion dirhams, which is around $110 billion equivalent. This has restored the confidence in SMEs in the UAE. We've been lucky enough within the UAE to account for 56% of all venture capital coming into our region. So really, from a innovation perspective, the UAE is well positioned as well to take this forward. The average transaction also grew during COVID. So despite the VC venture capital market being still lucrative and hungry to look for investments, the average deal size increased by 37.5% to around 11.8 million per transaction, which is a significant indicator of the maturity of the system. When your average deal size increases, it shows that you're moving from seed to pre-series A to series B. So we're seeing an increase in terms of the pipeline of SMEs. Digitization as well is gaining momentum globally. And we also have a big emphasis on digitization. We have an ambitious UAE Digital Government Strategy 2025, which also leverages the OECD digital policy framework to fit the UAE's own needs. I can say that with great confidence, we are now in the years ahead of a golden era, so to speak, for global digitization. There's an incredible opportunity for SMEs to do that. What has happened over the past year would have not had happened in the next 10 years. I think there's always a blessing in every unfortunate incident. I think this has stressed the importance of digitization. I don't want to keep my speech too long. I want to open up for discussion. I think the benefit and the beauty of such platforms is to engage in discussions. And thank you again for hosting me in this panel.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That's very kind. We do have a number of questions from the floor, and also a few pre-prepared questions that UNISMO kindly submitted. And I wonder, Your Excellency in UAE, if I could start with you. You mentioned the golden era, and certainly there is a feeling across the world that either we're heading for a positive time economically post-COVID as the world comes together, or we're heading for a great deal of difficulties. And I guess me being ever the optimist, I probably fall in the first category. I just wondered, I cited at the start of my introduction, effectively looking at this as a war on COVID. And we know that during the times of the Second World War, we saw a lot of innovations come together, whether it be radar, whether it be microwave, and what we would now term disruptive technologies. I wonder how the UAE is managing to balance keeping the doors open with the SMEs, but also keeping one eye on that future with the disruptive and transformative technologies, and making sure that your nation, as other nations, are not held back, but are actually just progressing as well and taking advantage of this new world order.
Sure. So I think the first step we did was to understand or to segment SMEs, so we know how to create the maximum value for each segment. And we segment them across multiple ways. One important way to segment them was through technology. So in a very basic sense, we have three types of SMEs. We have your basic conventional SME, which is a brick and mortar shop that could be anything from trade to normal F&B. That's the first type of SMEs. The second one we refer to as business innovation. So this is a startup that has created innovation in the business model, but not necessarily a new product. So that category, for example, would include companies like Uber, Amazon, and others, where you've really changed the business model, but you have not really invented a new product. That's the second segment. The third segment is startups that are built on the back of research, where you are really introducing a new product. So companies like Tesla, for example, will fall under that. And these are predominantly in mature systems. These are startups that are formed on the back of heavy research, heavy academic research. So a PhD student is researching, finds an application, then he or she finds a commercialization angle for that IP. So these are the three layers where we think about SMEs. And today our discussion is mostly on the second, which is disrupting business models. So now within our approach and our strategy for entrepreneurship, we do have a specific digitization track where we look for the best startups in that sector and we try to support them. And how do we do that? We do that, for example, through my other role as vice chairman of the Emirates Development Bank. I had the strategy committee over there as well. We have introduced funding for digitization. And that funding as well is a two-track fund. We either fund the specific startups that actually create that technology innovation, so they're the technology creators, as well as the technology adoption. So we also fund, for example, a traditional factory that wants to adopt a new technology to produce more efficiently. So funding goes on both fronts, one technology development, and then the other is technology adoption. So in summer, this is what we have done so far. We're allocating about 30 billion dirhams of loans for such initiatives. Digitalization is one of them. And we're trying to be very tactical, because I think the biggest issue we all have sitting on this panel is to define what digitization means. So digitization is a nice catchy word, but when you push comes to shove and you want to really push it through, is that digitizing the front end, the customer experience? Is it the machinery? So there are lots of angles to look into it. We also commissioned a study as well with partners of ours to look into, through the Chamber of Commerce, to look into existing companies. The first segment that I've mentioned, the legacy brick and mortar companies, and see for these companies across different sectors, how do they see digitization? And to our shock, we realize that even though we talk about the future, we talk about companies like Kareem for UAE base and others, there are many companies out there who don't have basic digitization in their own sectors. So as a policy maker, as you actually mentioned, you have to have a system that incubates and supports technology developers. It also supports first movers for adopting technology, but it also takes a common denominator of the weakest link when it comes to digitization, those companies that are looking for very basic types of digitization. So in a summary, it's about segmentation, it's about knowing your companies and their needs, and thirdly, providing the tools and mechanisms where you are offering financing at an affordable rate with the right tenor for these companies to be able to either develop or adopt technology.
Thank you. I think in terms of the UAE, and there's a lot in common here with certainly my friends in India, but most certainly in Bahrain, where we've had the 2030 visions. Effectively, I think what we're seeing is an acceleration or a bringing forward of those plans that were already in train, but with an added urgency now. But it's interesting that the visions that were developed by Bahrain and UAE in particular were almost foresightful in what we're coming across now. And of course, with Mazda and other institutions, innovation is nothing new to the UAE. I wonder if I can ask His Excellency in Bahrain. We saw this past week that you attended the new site of the BIECC project, which is a massive exhibition centre, and that follows on from airport and seaport upgrades pre and during the COVID period. You also mentioned Tamkeen, and I'm just wondering as to the level of optimism about the future now for Bahrain, and also perhaps with Tamkeen and other entities in Bahrain working together well in the past, there were nevertheless, I guess, different agendas that they had, or at least different priorities. And I wonder how Bahrain's managed to bring those priorities together in this almost war footing that we have in Bahrain and other countries, but particularly Bahrain, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Simon. I think since you mentioned Vision 2030, I'd like to start there. Bahrain, under the instruction of His Majesty, came out with Vision 30 in 2008. And Vision 2030 had one underlying goal, really. That was the culmination of the vision, is how to improve the average Bahraini citizen household income. And the idea was to magnify that, double it, triple it by the year 2030. And that has already been achieved before COVID. Now, COVID brings up a new scenario because a lot of the progress we made prior to COVID, we had to forgo, unfortunately. And in some cases, in some sectors, we have to start all over again. Part of that vision was how to improve the skills of the Bahraini workers on all levels, not just top levels and managerial and executive level, but also on medium and lower levels. And this is where Tamkeen comes in. Tamkeen, for those who've never heard about it before, the word Tamkeen in Arabic means enablement. And it was a fund that was created, funded by the private sector to train Bahrainis in the private sector. So the money is kind of recirculated from the private sector to create more employments for Bahrainis, to make Bahrainis more competitive and competent, so they take up more jobs in the private sector. And the success of Tamkeen has been very evident, not only in times of crisis, especially in COVID, where they had participated a lot in improving skills and making Bahrainis more desirable for recruitment, but also prior to that, when Tamkeen celebrated its 10th anniversary in 2018, they had by then spent 2 billion dinars of funds in Bahrain, which is about $5 billion, which has impacted about 30,000 Bahraini companies and more than 100,000 Bahraini citizens. So that was a great product that we introduced. It's quite unique. There's not many funds similar to it around the world, and it still continues to grow today. And we've seen its value in good times and more compounded in tougher times like COVID. So are we optimistic about the future? I think so. We have to. I mean, if we lose hope, there's no value to life. We definitely know much more about COVID today than we did a year ago. We've been through it. We know how ugly it can get, how tough it could get. We know what we should do to combat it. We have adopted as individuals, as communities, as governments, protocols and ways of how to deal with it, whether it is a lockdown, whether it is vaccination, whether it is PCR testing. As a chairman of an airline, I see this on a daily basis changing. We sometimes, unfortunately, have a plane in the sky heading somewhere, but before it gets there, we get a bulletin from that country saying the borders have been closed or certain protocols have been changed. And many times we have to deal with passengers, being stuck somewhere in the, in transit or in the decision process. So I think the world is getting more accustomed to COVID. We've learned to accept it as part of life. In the beginning, maybe it was something new to us. We didn't know how to deal with it. We now at least have much more vision about it. In terms of economic performance, we've had a better Q1 in 2021 than we had in 2020, taking into account that half of Q1 2020 was quite normal circumstances because January and most part of February were kind of normal business. Everything was open. People were fine traveling, attending to their work, attending to school. So given that, we've also seen a good recovery in the first part of this year. The problem we have with COVID is nobody really can tell when it will end or when we can just coexist. And with new variants and deltas coming out, every time we seem to be, reaching the end of the race, it's like somebody hitting a reset button and we have to start all over again. And that uncertainty and that ambiguity puts a pressure on the businesses and governments as well, because we have to start thinking of aid packages. We need to think of stimulus packages. Businesses have to start weighing their decisions again. Should they invest? Should they not invest? Should they expand? Should they shut down? And that has an impact on employment, has an impact on a cascading effect on many things in this industry and in the economy. So yes, we are optimistic. We are pushing forward. We have had a huge surge in Bahrain in the past month and a half, but we've taken measures, quite drastic measures, and we are in the 5th week now of these measures, and the cases have dropped from 3,000 a day to 300 a day. So we've managed to contain it. Of course, by law of numbers, the more you open up any country or any economy, you're bound to have more cases because people interact. And it's been proven that the fastest spread of COVID happens through human interaction. So I think with more vaccination coming around the world, and maybe one thing that will help a lot is that every country starts getting a fair share of vaccinations, because we still see some nations are lagging way behind in the receipt of their vaccinations. In Bahrain, we have started early. We started our vaccine program like the UAE in the 2nd quarter of last year. So today in Bahrain, we have reached a level where 2/3 of the population are vaccinated, and we are reaching a nice threshold that enable us to have more openness. But in many countries, and His Excellency Minister Al-Falasi and I just attended a Ministers of Tourism meeting in Riyadh about 3 weeks ago, and we were shocked to see that some of even the Arab countries haven't started vaccinations yet. To see such a big gap in the world between some countries reaching herd immunity levels and some countries haven't even started, I think this is a global issue, and it has to be treated on a global approach rather than individual or regional.
Thank you. And thank you, Excellency. It seems that those who acted quickly in terms of recognizing the health impacts, but also acted quickly in posing fiscal restraints and investments are the ones that seem to be doing pretty well at the moment in terms of marching ahead. I know that in Bahrain in particular, this past 2 years has seen a significant growth in the SME sector, which no doubt is due in very large part to the $4.3 billion stimulus package and other packages there. It's quite incredible. If I may ask Your Excellency, Mr. Sarangai, I noticed on Saturday you'd stated that there was a need to understand the importance of integration with the global value chain, which is driving trade currently. And you said that, if I just may go to the note, that the role and potential of Indian SMEs, recognized with the need to improve their efficiency, productivity and quality, needs to be viewed in the context of a globally competitive landscape. you have a piece of legislation there that effectively gave your department policy writing authority and legal framework authority over SMEs. My question to you is how India has coped with stimulating its SME sector from the perspective of its national government and working perhaps with state governments, and how that has actually balanced itself out for India.
Exactly, COVID-19 crisis and the lockdown was a phase of evolution for MSMEs. Digitalization opened the gates for many local businesses to strengthen their operations and cope up with, to begin with, local grocery stores that functioned traditionally have now embraced the doorstep online delivery trend. Further, digital payment modes were adopted to maintain social distancing as customers did not prefer cash payments. Physically meeting with doctors was a traditional sales process in the pharmacy industry. However, this was replaced overnight by discussions over digital communication channels. This digitalization has changed their knowledge base, skills, and execution during the pandemic. Agribusiness and chemical distributors are utilizing online networking channels like Facebook and Zoom videos to connect with farmers in rural areas. Digital resources played a tremendous role in the education sector to provide classes and training to the students online. Hence, many of the technologies became integral to these businesses. And this has been not only a compulsion, but this has become a necessity, digitalization, because with the surge of technology and the prevailing COVID-19 dilemma, the future of the Indian economy will have everything to do with digitalization. No doubt, Indian startups and MSMEs perceive that technology can be a pivotal aspect for the ventures and even to bounce back post-pandemic. The increasing affordability of smartphones, rising internet usage, and growing digital media use are shaping the future of MSMEs and startups in India. India is among the biggest and fastest developing markets for digital users. As Digital India emerges, one can see a paradigm shift in the conventional ways of business. The small and medium scale enterprises understand the value of digital transformation for business expansion. They believe digital proficiency is vital to set foot in the online market successfully. Needless to say, digitalization has become a critical factor for all enterprises to survive. Even our center-state relationship, their working mechanism is based on this digital method nowadays. MSMEs and startups can make better decisions with the help of data analytics and business intelligence as they offer a more in-depth insight into customer behavior. They acquire details help to gauge and foresee client needs. Further, with the rise of cloud-based solutions, businesses can create systems that can improve the customer experience. Besides, companies can produce new products or services that meet customer demands. It also advances the delivery process of the right products at the right time, that too at a moderate price range. All these factors boost customer engagement for their business. That is key for any enterprise to thrive. And our government, under the able leadership of a great champion like our Honorable Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi, has been doing excellent work in this digital sector, and we are working under his able leadership to digitalize the whole of the country, to digitalize our villages, our urban areas, our industries, and our education sector, our manufacturing sector, our rural industries, every sector, and we are getting tremendous result out of that.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you. Dr. Falassi, we've had a question relating to Dubai 2020, and I might just broaden it. First of all, how is the planning now going for the obviously delayed Dubai 2020, and how much at the forefront is digitalization for those proposing to attend and have stands at the Dubai 2020? And I might just broaden that a little bit more widely. Obviously, that will hopefully see the world coming together in some way for Dubai 2020. But I wonder how much the Gulf Cooperation Council has come together in perhaps looking at cross-Gulf policies. His Excellency mentioned earlier that there's been a lot of cooperation, as we know, between the UAE and Bahrain on a range of matters, tourism and a whole range of areas. I wondered how, more broadly, you saw the GCC coming together with policy initiatives to help the SMEs.
Mm-hmm. So let me answer the first question. With regards to Dubai Expo 2020, as you all know, it has been postponed to this year. We're going to start in October. I think it was the right decision. Part of our effort to make this a successful one, and probably the most successful expo to be ever hosted, is to offer vaccinations for free for all participants. And that has been extremely successful. Also, the sheer scale of the event in itself and being an open space as well is, I think, an area where I think the UAE is able to host many countries. Expo, again, is all about connecting minds, creating the future. And you cannot do that in isolation. You have to do it with, not only on a multilateral level in terms of different countries, but also in terms of different, stakeholders, government, private sector, and entrepreneurship or micro SMEs. So again, entrepreneurship is critical to this. And I believe a lot of eyes will be on Expo, giving the sheer size of it. We know, for example, in the Summer Olympics in Tokyo, with the opening happening on the 23rd of July, it will be with domestic spectators. And there is also the option to not have any spectators given if the health measures, if tougher health measures are put in place. However, for Expo, it is by definition an event that is welcoming international visitors. So it will be the first major global event of its kind that attracts global tourists and global spectators. So again, it will be a testament for us to be able to manage the event. I think it's being managed very well. If you look at the vaccination rate, it's one of the highest globally. If you look at the testing rate, it's also one of the highest globally. So I think we're all set when it comes to Expo. You mentioned a point as well when it comes to cooperation with the GCC. By definition, the GCC is one block. We are one market. So products and exports are moving freely between these markets, yet we also work on specific mandates together. So for example, besides Bahrain, with Saudi Arabia, we're talking to Munshi'at, which is a government entity responsible for really catalyzing the local ecosystem. We're also facilitating the flow of companies between the GCC countries. We have a number of companies that have been established in the UAE, looking to either expand in Saudi Arabia or to offer franchising, so that the business owners there can create their own businesses there and also benefit. So there is cross cooperation. We're also working more importantly on the regulation. So when it comes to introducing new regulation, we also work together. When it comes to having free trade agreements, we're also working very closely together. So I think one aspect is regulation. That's an ongoing perspective on policies. But the other one is mostly on the projects and how can we really ensure that both our local market and the GCC market benefit, because again, the market is very small. If you compare the GCC as a block to the EU or to the US, the market size is extremely small. So you cannot actually have a thriving entrepreneurship ecosystem without making it easier for them to expand. I gave the example previously of careermansour.com. They became global unicorns because they expanded out of the UAE. They went to Saudi, they went into Egypt, they went into India and Pakistan. So they see the UAE as a platform, but again, usually the first step is into Saudi and then they move into the bigger markets of Egypt and Saudi Arabia. So to answer the question in a simple way, we work on these directly with government officials in terms of market access and also in terms of protection of these SMEs from regulation changes.
Thank you. I should point out, I helped the Australian government in a very small way with suggestions for the Australian stand at Expo. So I'm sure you'll pay a special visit to that one when you.
Absolutely, it goes without saying.
Thank you. Thank you. Your Excellency, Al-Zayani, I wonder if I could ask that similar question to you in terms of what you've seen by way of GCC cross-border policy cooperation around sustaining SMEs, and also an additional follow-up question to that. how is the government and private sector working with the digital transformation of SMEs in Bahrain?
I'll start with the latter part of your question, if you don't mind. I think it's very important to distribute the roles in the digital transformation. And one of the fallacies of SMEs is that they expect government to run their businesses for them. And I think we have to make it very clear from the outset that it is not the job of government to run private businesses, and they probably make a mess of it anyway if they try. And that should be the sole responsibility of the person who started that business. The government has a clear role in regulating, in legislating, and in enforcing laws. It has a role in opening up markets through FTAs or through bilateral agreements of trade. It has a role in facilitating by promoting a nation or a philosophy or a sector. But many people, you know, when the times get tough and they get into problems, and no doubt, you know, COVID has amplified that, they expect government to just take over. That, in my opinion, is wrong. Each is to his own, and they complement one another. They should work with one another, but we should not swap responsibilities just because, you know, one has not succeeded in doing their role, so somebody else takes over to do that. So we have to find ways how to work together, how to complement each other, how to build strategies together, and how to create an ecosystem to flourish the startups and the micro and the SMEs. Like His Excellency Dr. Al-Falasi mentioned, we also in Bahrain, being a very, very small country, you know, 700 square kilometers in area, 1.5 million of population, we are trying to instill a culture in our startups and in our communities, the SME communities, that think big from day one. Maybe not attempt it from the first day, but always have it in the back of your mind. Don't start even thinking on a level as big as Bahrain or even the GCC. Think of how can you be a global brand. If you were in the food sector, how can you do what McDonald's did? If you are in the fashion sector, how can you do what, you know, something like Zara? And that way we try to instill the culture of growth and globalization into them from day one. One of the problems we've had here, I think, and it has to do with our size, is because of the country being so small and contained, there was never an attraction to invest heavily in e-commerce, because, you know, 15 minutes and you can be in the next store or the next shopping mall, and people find it convenient to go there and, you know, spend time and buy their goods directly. This pandemic has shown us that e-commerce is not something to be ignored, and it is a gateway to the world. So we are in the process in Bahrain now to develop a national e-commerce strategy, the same way we did in 2017 when we started working on an SME development strategy, which was announced in February 2018, a 5-year strategy. And from that, the SME development board was formed back then. And we've seen huge, huge impact on the sector because of that, because there was clarity, there was vision, and there was a roadmap. So we're doing the same now with e-commerce. A lot of the people in business in Bahrain, not only in the small businesses, even some of the larger companies, were totally anti e-commerce and saw it as a waste of time and waste of money and something that they don't need in their businesses. Today, it has become a fact, and it has shown us that we need to invest in e-commerce. And we've seen companies who never considered spending a penny a few years ago, putting quite substantial budgets to catch up on lost time. In terms of the GCC, I think we all have the same fundamentals in the GCC. We all have the same demographics. The majority of our populations in the GCC are below the age of 35. This is a huge challenge for us to create employment for this future generation. The level of education is continuously improving in the GCC. So this generation is much more educated and open-minded than 50 years ago, and therefore their ambitions are also much bigger than their ancestors. So it is a challenge to all governments to create employment for these, not by creating government agencies and not by inflating the public sector, but by creating more opportunity in the private sector and opening up the private sector so these people become job creators instead of being job seekers. And that is something that's quite challenging. It impacts not just SME development, goes back to education systems in the nation, it goes back to family values, goes back to community work, and you have to change the mindset to be a nation more adventurous, more aggressive in a certain way, and more risk-taking. And you have to be ready that along the way you will have pitfalls. And how can you, get up from your fall and emerge stronger?
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, and I'm very grateful. I know we're running out of time now. Two of the Excellencies have to leave us, so I may just wrap this up. It was interesting to note, I think everybody will agree, and thank you everybody for the questions and Your Excellencies, their contribution, but I think everybody will note the level of positivity as well as government proactivity in these three very different nations. It occurs to us, I think, that whilst COVID has put the borders up from a health perspective, the borders have never been lower when it comes to commercial activity and opportunities going forward. And certainly the SME, the primary source of revenue for most governments and primary source of employment, is playing a huge part in that. So thank you, all three of our Excellencies, for their very kind contribution. And I'm very grateful. And I'm now going to hand back to Abdul Hassan. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Am I heard?
Am I on?
Audible? You can hear me? Okay. So thank you very much. I think this has been really very informative, and we do understand that both ministers from India and UAE have to leave, and we'll have around 20 minutes for the Q&A for this. You can hear me? Hello, you can hear me now? Okay, so I do understand that I think both. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Thanks, Simon. I think it's been really very informative ministerial dialogue. We do understand that I think both ministers in India and UAE have an urgent commitment for which they have to leave us. But kindly, Mr. Zayani, His Excellency, Mr. Zayani, stay with us for around 20 minutes, Your Excellency, for the question and answer, because we have lots of questions waiting. So that's fine for you. We go for around 20 minutes, more or less, for the questions. Questions will be to be answered by Mr. Zayani from Bahrain.
Another 20 minutes,
Yes.
No, sorry, I can't. I have a GCC Ministers of Commerce meeting, and as you know, Bahrain presides over the GCC this year, so I have to leave.
Minutes you'll give us?
So how many minutes, Your Excellency?
I gave you the allotted time. You said till 11:20.
Can we go for
Yes,
question
same here,
answer
Your
for 10
Excellency.
minutes at least?
لا ما اقدر يا اخي اسمح لي عندنا اجتماع وزراء الخليج.
11.
Okay, so with this then, I think thank you very much, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I think with this we come to the end of our ministerial dialogue. I think we got an hour from or even more from the minister's time. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure that the SMEs, owners, entrepreneurs get a lot lessons and benefit from such a ministerial dialogue. And I think with this, we come to the end of the ministerial dialogue. So thank you very much, Your Excellencies. And with this, I think we go to the opening speech by His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador Zarqani. So thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Minister,
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting us.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Wallah.
Bye.
Thank you.
والعمر سلام.
Okay, so we turn to Ambassador Zarqani, the UN representative, and for his opening speech. Yes, Your Excellency, Ambassador Zarqani.
Thank you very much, and thank you. And yeah, apologies for the technical situation from the morning. It seems to be that technology can conspire against you at some time. So it does feel now that we're serving the appetizer after the main course, but I still hope that there's still appetite with the participants. So. Excellencies, participants, good morning to everyone. I just want to use this opportunity to thank the Bahraini SME Society and the United International SMEs Organization for the kind invitation. I'm delighted to join to belatedly mark the opening of the 9th annual MSMEs Day Summit. As we begin to turn our attention from a COVID-19 response to a COVID-19 recovery, I think the theme of SMEs and digital transformation post the pandemic seems a very apt banner under which to discuss the path ahead. So, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as we've heard from their excellencies, the ministers, they have a very critical role in the global economy. They help reduce poverty by creating jobs for the country's growing labor force and are part of the critical supply chain for products and services. So according to the International Council for Small Business, formal and informal MSMEs make up over 90% of all firms and account for 70% of total global employment and 50% of GDP. And I think we heard also numbers at the from the national level from their excellencies, the ministers, that reflected those global numbers. So according to the World Bank, 600 million jobs will be needed by 2030 to absorb the growing global workforce, which makes SME development a high priority for many governments around the world. For this reason, the UN General Assembly declared the 27th of June as the Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises Day to raise public awareness of their contribution to sustainable development and the global economy. Distinguished participants, today, perhaps more than ever, MSMEs are in need of critical support. MSMEs have been hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the road to recovery will not be quick, nor will it be easy. And while there are encouraging early signs of recovery, recovery must be inclusive and must deliver sustainable development for all. As His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa's Economic Vision 2030 lays out, the economy and indeed society more broadly must be based around three guiding principles: sustainability, fairness, and competitiveness. Or in the language of the 2030 agenda, we must make sure to leave no one behind. We must build back better. The United Nations has been a champion of public-private partnerships and for decades have worked closely with governments, civil society, and the private sector towards realizing national development priorities. In the next couple of days, you will hear from my dear colleagues at ILO, UNDP, and UNIDO Investment and Technology Promotion Office, all of whom have key contribution to the development of a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem in various countries. Distinguished participants, I want to take this opportunity once more to thank you for the kind invitation to join you to mark this important occasion. I look forward to the outcomes and recommendations from this summit on behalf of my UN colleagues, and as we emerge together into an uncertain but a hopeful post-COVID future, I would like to reaffirm the UN's deepest commitments to working closely with the Bahraini SMEs Society, the United International SMEs Organization, and all of you to ensure an inclusive, vibrant, and sustainable MSME ecosystem in the Kingdom of Bahrain and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention, and please excuse the delayed opening remarks. Thank you. Back to you.
Excellency, it was very fruitful information. Also hearing from you some numbers this morning. As you may all agree, it is not whether or not to adapt digitalization, but how quickly and seamlessly adapt, and more importantly, adapt to digitalization in order to remain successful in businesses, marketing, e-commerce, technology transfer. And this is what is all happening now. Definitely, yes, digitalization has encompassed almost every aspect of a human endeavor, to be in business, medicine, social, education, and other fields. Just imagine the chaos that will follow if all mobile phones in the world are switched off for a day, or if the operation of the mega services and fiber optics network that sustain the worldwide web experience a major hiccup. And now, please welcome, we come to our last minute of today's summit program. And please welcome with me Dr. Abdul Hassan Ad-Dairi, the chairman of Bahrain SME Society and the general coordinator, United International SMEs Organization, UNISMO, to deliver the closing remarks and announcement of the 10th International UN MSMEs Day Summit 2022. Your Excellency, Dr. Abdul Hassan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rahim. And great thanks to the ministers from UAE, Bahrain, and India for the informative session. I think one of the few MSMEs ministerial dialogues that we witness. And I think with this, we come to the end of day one, our 9th International UN MSMEs Summit 2021. And of course, thanks to the UN President Coordinator in Bahrain, His Excellency Ambassador Az-Zarqani. This is the end of day one, but not the end of our conference. With this, we come to the end of day one of the summit. And tomorrow at 5 o'clock Bahrain time, which is 2 p.m. GMT, we'll be having the second day of our 9th International UN MSME Summit 2021. And I'm delighted that at the end of day one of the summit, I'm delighted to announce for you the 10th International UN MSMEs Summit 2021, and the hosting country for the next year's summit is going to be Geneva, Switzerland. I'd like to welcome all of you to join us next year on June 27th, 2022 for the 10th International UN MSMEs Summit at Geneva, Switzerland. And I'd like to invite with us now Ms. Christine Engvig, our UNISMO board member and representative of the European continent, representative of Geneva, to have few words to welcome you all to the next year conference in Geneva. Christine, most welcome and great to have you on board with us.
Hey, and thank you everybody. And so I'm Christine Engvig and I'm here near Geneva today. And I'm so excited that we will also have this conference in Europe next year. Originally Norwegian, one of my work is also to put women's entrepreneurship on the agenda. And so we can all work together on this beautiful planet of ours to create more thriving small businesses. And here in Europe, we have had a long tradition in all European countries really of small businesses as well. And I think being in Switzerland particularly, it's the head central of very many international organizations of the United Nations and many other associations also. And knowing that small and medium-sized enterprises has not been so highly present actually in the UN, I think it's about time we all come there and show ourselves and our enthusiasm and represent the small businesses, which is representing also so much aliveness. And so I look forward to seeing all of you in Switzerland, and hopefully in person next year, or in one way or another in hybrid version, so we can bring in people from across all borders. And it's also beautiful to be part of this organization, knowing we can build bridges as we build business and association life. I think this is such a beautiful thing when we work internationally, that our work is not only about commerce, but it also becomes about so much more friendship, peace building, and workplaces. So with that, I want to thank all of you for the work of this morning and or evening if you are somewhere else in the planet. And I look forward to seeing all of you in Switzerland and online as we continue this important work of creating and assuring SMEs are thriving worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for being on board with us. We aim that you have benefited from the discussions taking place today. And we look forward to see you tomorrow, and where we'll have the recommendations of both today and tomorrow. We'll have them at the end of the day tomorrow, at the closer or at the conclusion, and ending our summit tomorrow. So tomorrow evening, Bahrain time, 2 p.m. GMT in the afternoon. And of course, that it's going to be 10 a.m. in the United States East Coast. So we'll look forward to see you all tomorrow on very important issues prevailing for the MSMEs. Without any further ado, I'd like to thank you all for your being with us for the day, and look forward to see you all tomorrow. Thank you. مع السلامة. Bye bye.
Thank you. مع السلامة.